All right. We're here.
We're here.
You're here.
I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. And as always, we got a very special guest. This guy really needs no introduction. I've got a couple of printouts here from the intranet. And, look, multiple music accolades and awards, multiple culinary awards. We've got the link below for Wikipedia and other sources if you want to get more information on all this, because it's quite the catalog. Has opened up for legendary artists such as Ray Charles, B.B. King, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Fabulous Thunderbirds, Dave Edmunds, hailing originally from Gastonia, North Carolina, and good friend and mentor of mine. Please welcome Mr. Mel Melton.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Good to have you here.
Been a while.
So we have a history that goes back over the last 10, 12 years with Papa Mojo's Roadhouse. And, you know, I knew you as when I was a teenager and always looked up to, that was always my favorite venue when it was still around. And the legacy still exists today when we talk to other artists that are in the Triangle area, and we always have great memories from Papa Mojo's. And I want to say first, before we begin, thank you for the legacy that you left and bringing people together like that.
Thank for all the people that came in there too. You know, we couldn't have done it without that. So. And
I still think there's parts of me that have fat from the fried shrimp.
It might have a little bit.
It was incredible, incredible. I miss that a lot.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you the recipe. Just let me know.
Yeah. So beginning stages for you. You obviously are well versed in culinary and in music, which is a unique that you don't really see that much. You know,
right.
As far as it's funny because it's like the two, in my opinion, some of the two most difficult businesses to start or be in, and maybe you're just one of those mavericks that's able to push through like that. I have tremendous respect for you that you're able to do that. But beginning stages, what started first for you? Was it more music, more culinary, more cooking? And like way back, you know, let's say elementary school years.
The truth is, and I've told this to many people, I never set out to make either one of them a career.
Okay.
You know, I come from a country family in Gastonia. My mom had 5 sisters. There were 6 sisters. They were always cooking from scratch. My grandmothers, both my grandmothers, everybody cooked. So I was always around food at that really good Southern cooking thing.
Right.
You know? And then my dad was he was an operatic tenor, and he just never felt comfortable moving on to like the New York scene, trying to be an opera singer or anything like that. So he was a choir director. He taught music in schools. He had private voice lessons, and he started me on piano when I was like 5, just to like learn the basics.
Gotcha.
And then I was attracted to the violin. So when I was 9, I got a violin. I started playing in a local youth group in Charlotte. But the funny thing is, he always played country harmonica just for fun. And it was all these country songs, Oh, Susanna, you name it. He didn't know anything about blues or technique like that, but he always told me, he said, well, I'm going to get you a harmonica, but I want you to understand it's a real instrument. It's not just a toy, you know. So he got me one, and I got on it right away, and I started playing all those kind of songs. And then when I got to college, I had a couple guys I knew, and they dropped by my room one night with a Paul Butterfield record and said, have you ever heard this guy? And I was like, no. Well, once I heard it, that pretty much messed my whole life up.
Right.
I was like, how do I get to be that guy?
Yeah.
And then the cooking thing, I mean, I learned when I was in Louisiana back in the Cajun country, everybody cooks down there. And I loved that food from the get-go. Mm-hmm. And So I learned to cook from like the Cajun families, the dads, the grandmothers, the aunts, the uncles. So that's how I learned how to cook gumbo and all that stuff. So it just fell in, and I went to Austin a couple times back in the 70s. And even back then, that whole market was inundated with musicians. I mean, all the Texas guys and many others coming through. So I never could get any headway there. And in the meantime, I had put a band together with Sonny Landreth in Lafayette. And Sonny's like, well, I'm not moving to Austin. So if you're doing that, you're on your own. Well, eventually I came back, but not before I had taken a job as a dishwasher in Austin at a barbecue joint, because I had to, I just had to make some money doing something.
Yeah.
And I gradually got involved with the culinary thing. And this barbecue restaurant was out near the Lake Travis, which is like a big resort area. And all those resorts had European chefs. And they used to come in there for breakfast and lunch and hang out. And I got to know a couple of them. And they were like, let me help you out. I'm gonna bring you out to my resort. It was a tennis resort.
Wow.
And at that point, the guy convinced me. He said, look, you've got musical talent, but you never know where that's going to take you. You've got culinary talent. Get in the local chef association, and I'll help you move up the ranks until you get certified.
What by culinary talent was when this individual, whoever he was, right? How did he see that in you? Was it just after you started working in the kitchen, or you just had a knack for it in the early stages?
A lot of times they would come in sort of in a slow period, and there wouldn't be anybody back in the kitchen except me and maybe some other person. So I would cook whatever they wanted, breakfast, lunch.
Okay.
And gradually got to know them and talk to them. And so they're the ones that helped me out. And then the funny thing was, it got to be around Mardi Gras one year. And this was before Mardi Gras and Cajun food and all that really hit. And Zydeco too. And they were wanting to promote like a Mardi Gras thing with Mardi Gras food. And one of the owners said, well, Mel was in Lafayette. He knows how to cook gumbo. So we did that, and it got major news coverage in the Austin American-Statesman with a picture of me in the paper. And
wow.
And that just kind of went from there.
Right. So you already had it really, like you said earlier, the family background.
Yeah.
With constant cooking. So there was probably a baseline there.
I think so.
To a certain degree. Yeah. I would think so as well. And it's funny that you bring up Sonny, because I had him written down next. I read somewhere, falling in love with Louisiana, and you decided not to go back to UNC.
Right.
And that was right when you met with Sonny. And that you guys started, what was the name of that group again? Bayou
Rhythm was another incarnation of that group. Originally, when I got down there that summer, Sonny had a band, and the friend that I had from Lafayette who was going to college up here had invited me down specifically to meet Sonny and some of the guys he had gone to high school with.
Okay.
Because at that point, I was playing some blues harmonica, and I was interested. Well, Sonny and I hit it off right away, and we kept that kind of core friendship group through all those years, off and on, all the way until I moved out to Chicago in the mid-'80s. So, and the first time I heard Sonny, I was like, what in the heck, man? So yeah, and the food attracted me right away. The whole culture is so different from anything you're going to find in Gastonia or in that area.
Yeah.
That I was immediately attracted to it. And I decided, I felt like my parents were wasting money putting me through the University of North Carolina. I had a goal of being a writer. I'd won some writing awards, but I never really had the discipline to just sit down and face a blank page and just do that all the time.
What focus in writing?
Fiction and poetry. I wrote a couple poems, and I was in the North Carolina Poetry Society, which is still probably a really good organization. But they had an annual contest, and even though I was in high school, I won second place going against like all the college students at North Carolina colleges. So once again, at that point, it started attracting attention. I got some coverage, and that was always my intent. I was like, well, I'm going to be this famous Southern writer, and I've got tons of writing. I always kept a road journal through everything in Lafayette and everything. I've never developed it into anything, but
your original music as well, too, right? I mean, your original music as well.
Everything.
You know, and not to skip ahead on your timeline, but in 2000, you became an author with Cookie Boy.
Yeah.
I don't, I haven't had a chance to really read it or research it, but
well, I'm looking for them. They're out there somewhere. Well, that was a funny thing too, is I had a promoter out in New Mexico, and we were touring through that area a lot back then, Colorado, all through there. And he said, he hired me to do a show at this convention center in Farmington, New Mexico, where we would pre-sell tickets for 100 dinners, and I would do the cooking, and then the band would play that night.
Wow.
And we would do that. So we did that, and it was a big success. And I had done a few things on a smaller scale. So he and his partner were interested in wanting to know if I'd do a cookbook. And they had a publishing company, and they would do it. So that's really how that happened. It was like, well, okay, we'll do a cookbook. And it was good. We came out with it. We toured behind it. It came out for Mardi Gras, but it was in February, and we were touring like the East Coast in one of the biggest ice storm things that ever happened. And we missed half the gigs. You couldn't even get anywhere.
It's horrible.
So in the meantime, I'm working on a new cookbook, actually.
Oh, really?
My second one, yeah. And it's more of it's a memoir with stories of all the restaurants I've ever been in.
Wow.
With some recipes from all of them.
Wow.
As well as some of the things about the music and the bands and over the years and all that stuff. So I think it ought to be pretty good. I've got a guy helping me with it who's done a lot of that stuff. So
when you're looking to release?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I was hoping for Mardi Gras is February 25th this year, and I was hoping to do it in conjunction with a new CD. The band's working on a new CD as well. I haven't done one in a long time.
Yeah.
So the goal would be to tie those two together, because that's the way everyone we approach with it likes that idea of, you got music, you got food, you got the cookbook.
It's your niche.
Yeah, we can take this thing to festivals with the food. We can take it to cooking shows with the music, and I've done a lot of that over the years. Southern Season, I hate to hear they're closing, but I've been doing cooking shows there with the band for like 15 years.
Is that the location, Chapel Hill?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's unfortunate that
I had no idea that they were.
Yeah, they made the announcement. They've struggled, and they're getting ready to shut the doors. I don't know what's going to happen over there.
Wow.
But I haven't done any shows over there. I did them all the time when I could, when I had the restaurant. Because, it was helping promote the restaurant. But since I closed, I haven't done any over there. So,
well, Cajun is, safe to say, the primary style for you. And flavor palette. I love it. Yeah. I think it's great. Gumbo and shrimp. It's when those spices hit.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, it's
quite
got
like
a lot of depth.
A lot of depth. That's really a great way of explaining it.
So there's a lot of flavors. There's a lot of techniques that aren't they're inclusive into that area. You don't see them outside of that area with the roux and the flavors and all that stuff. So, and that being said, that'll always be my favorite palate. But nonetheless, I was lucky enough, like I said, this first chef that I worked for in Austin was, he was Danish. And he was like an expert pastry chef. And we used to make our own puff pastry and all this stuff. When I'm not good at that either. He said, I'm going to let you go, but you got to promise me you'll never get a job as a baker. So I was lucky. I worked under 2 French chefs. I worked under a German chef. I worked under an Italian chef.
Wow. I've
had some good Latinos in the kitchen that I've worked with. So I've kind of covered the bases, but nonetheless, you're right. That's the wheelhouse for me, is the Cajun Creole thing.
What would you say from a kitchen standpoint is the most difficult dynamic? Owning a restaurant, running a restaurant. Exactly. Yeah, and that was kind of the response I was looking to provoke, you know.
Well, it all comes down to people.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, you can have all the skills, you know, you can have all the techniques, you can have the kitchen, you can have the facility, but it's the people that come through that door that work with you, that work for you, that come in and pay money to be there. That's really what it all comes down to. And it's the same way with the music. You know, I get a lot of questions about how did you get into that? How did you get into the music and the food? And the only thing I can say is I've analyzed it, and it's a parallel track, really. Because number one, when you're a chef or you're cooking in a restaurant, you get immediate feedback. As soon as that plate hits the table, you're going to find out if they liked it or if they didn't.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing on stage. You know, it's either going over or it's not. And then a kitchen crew is almost like a band. You know, I mean, you got the saute guy, you got the prep guy, you got the salad lady, you got the fryer, you got the grill, and it all has to be a team that works together. And it's just like having
like a
bass player, a drummer, a
Yeah.
guitar player, and all that stuff. So there's a lot of similarity. And the other thing is, it's the reason I like both those businesses or careers is you're in the business of making people happy.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what you're there for. You're there to,
The service industry.
yeah, to bring some joy into their lives.
With a product. You know,
Yeah,
whether
or not.
shrimp or a single, or, you know. Yeah, and it's funny because along that line of thought, when I was an intern at Manifold Recording, Ian Schreier, who I was under, you know, the chief engineer there, he always talked about how cooking was perhaps the best analogy he could think of for mixing music and the recording process.
Well, good.
And that, I think that was like in I was there for like a year and a half in 2016, late 2015 and 2016. And that has stuck with me for the last now almost 5 years. This is a great analogy, but it even stems further from that with the people aspect, not even just the technology and the recording or cooking process.
Right.
So
it's always the people, you know, really that's what, and I get a lot of not a lot, but I get approached by these young guys that are going to chef school and being a chef now has become like this fantastic rock star status thing. And when I first started doing it, I tried not to let anybody know that I was wearing a chef coat. It wasn't some like illustrious position. But looking at it evolve, and I get these young guys that are on their way, they're on the track, and they said, what would you say is the most important thing about becoming a chef or a restaurateur? And I'll tell them this, and I'll tell them straight up. I'm like, learn Spanish. Because I learned French. I can speak French. I can go to France and I can sing in Cajun French and all that. But the kitchens from like lower end all the way to the top drawer restaurants in New York City or San Francisco, they're inherently staffed with like these Latinos with major culinary backgrounds, and they have this drive, work ethic. And if I knew Spanish, at least I'd know when they're cussing me out. I have, every now and then I have a little hint about it. But,
right.
But that's what I would recommend is like learn Spanish to help you out a lot.
Yeah. I had my 2 years in high school, and it goes either way. It's like you're better with reading or you're better with speaking. I was one of those that was better with reading.
Me too.
And I had a Latin background when I was in grade school, like third, fourth, fifth grade, somewhere around there for a couple of years. And that kind of helped visually because a lot of the stemmings were the same and the tenses, but not much of it really stuck. But if you gave me a piece of paper, I could. If you dropped me in Mexico City, I could get around. But
right. It comes back. It might not be that great, but at least you can find your way around. But well, that's the other thing in Cajun country back then when I was playing with like the Zydeco guys, they conversed in Cajun French. They preferred that.
Wow.
So that helped reignite me learning it. And I spoke to some French guys about it, and their point was with Cajun French, it's almost like an antiquated form of French that would compare to like Old English with
Interesting.
us. That they never picked up all the slang terms and the quick moves. It's just very formal.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, while we're on the Zydeco tangent here, let's talk a little bit about with Sonny when you were touring with that time frame. That was when there was some of the opening slots for like Ray Charles, B.B. King, SRV.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories or anything that sticks out particular? And if so, if you could just elaborate on some of those.
Well, we were very fortunate to get that stuff. And the other thing, let me just say this. I mean, Sonny, good Lord, nobody does anything like he does. And he's always been like that. But from the get-go, we never set out to be a Zydeco or a blues band. I mean, we were kind of like hippies. We were playing like rock music with that flavor.
Right.
And that's kind of the influence we got. Now, Sonny ended up landing some gigs with some legendary swamp blues guys, and he toured with Clifton Chenier as well.
Didn't he work with Knopfler a little bit, Mark Knopfler at one point?
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
He did.
Yeah.
We just got off the road. Peter Frampton's got a new CD, and he's got this neuromuscular thing. He's not going to be able to play anymore.
Wow.
So this is kind of his last go-around. And Sonny was like the featured artist on that.
Wow.
And he's got a new CD coming out himself. I've done 3 CDs since I got out of Louisiana and moved back home. And Sonny and CJ Chenier have played on all of them. And they've also agreed to play on this one.
Wow.
So.
That's exciting.
No kidding.
That's exciting. When can we look for that?
I don't know. We're in rehearsal. We've got studio time booked starting January the 17th. But I learned a long time ago, learn the songs before you go in the studio, because once the meter starts running, you need to have all that stuff under control. So
unless you're like me and you own it and you can do it whenever you want.
Well, there you go.
And that's the other angle. But I will say, there's some magic about the constraint of time. And how many, and the limiting of yourself. There really is a magic there.
It doesn't happen until you get in there. And I've never had the luxury of having material that we've learned and actually performing it live before we went in the studio. And this is the first time I've done that. And all I'll say is it's a double-edged sword, I mean, I talked to Sonny, he was with John Hyatt off and on for years, and they went in with Hyatt to do a CD. I can't remember when it was, but he got them all in there, and they started tracking this stuff with no rehearsal. And the understanding was they were just whipping everything into shape. And when it was all over, Hyatt's like, well, we got the CD. And that's not the way Sonny operates. He's like a technician.
Very technician oriented.
But, it seemed to. So I think there's a benefit to both.
Yes.
It's good to at least know the chords and basic arrangement before you start walking in there.
Yeah, for sure. So you left the scene a little bit. It says here in '86. And Chicago full-time career in culinary, grand prize at Rolls-Royce.
Yeah.
Can't even read my own handwriting. Champagne, chef competition. Moved back to NC in 1990, still working as a chef. During that time, were you still playing music?
No. When I
really?
moved,
Okay.
The thing was, when I moved to Chicago, we were in orbit with the band. We had an LP out on a label out of Louisiana, but it had got picked up by Epic.
Okay.
So they had taken control of the record. They had distribution on it. And we were on the road all the time. And we toured incessantly. And I had already thought about quitting the band because I was making some serious money as a chef at this restaurant in Lafayette. And, the band's point was, you can't just walk out. We got this record out there. And we had a manager from New York City, and she said, well, I've come up with an idea. Well, when you guys go into whatever town, Kansas City, Providence, Rhode Island, whatever, we'll arrange for you to do some kind of cooking event to where you can do a cooking show or you can put something on their menu.
Right.
And we can promote both things. And we started doing that. Well, we got to Chicago, and it was a 3-band tour. It was us, Clifton Chenier, and Rockin' Doopsie. And they decided to have a gumbo showdown between me and Rockin' Doopsie. So we both did this gumbo thing, and then they sold it. And at the end of the night, this fella came up to me and he says, hey, he introduced himself. He said, I'm a independent restaurant consultant, and I have a radio show on CBS Radio here in Chicago. And he said, I'm representing a group that's opening a new restaurant, and would you consider coming up here and being the executive chef? And I was like, I don't know if I would. But the other thing was, that night I met my wife, who I'm still married to for 35 years or 32 years. And she had come in with some girlfriends. She was from Chicago. So we started, based on that, just being in Chicago for 2 days, we started this like dating pattern between New Orleans and Chicago.
Right.
She was coming up to Jazz Fest. She went to Jazz Fest every year. So when she came up there, I showed them around all this stuff, and she wanted to move to New Orleans. She was like, man, I want to get out of Chicago. And then this guy, he said, well, will you fly up and interview for this job? And I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I went up there. I interviewed with him. I liked him a lot, but I just wasn't ready. We were still touring.
Right.
I just wasn't ready to make that kind of move. And they called me up the next week and they said, look, the head guy, the finance guy, is all family. He said, he wants you to fly back up here. He wants to talk to you. And I said, okay. They paid the thing. They picked me up at the airport, went out there. And I guess they thought I was playing games about the money, because all of a sudden they made me an offer and I was just like, really? You're going to pay me that to do? So I said, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it. And
there you go.
I told my soon-to-be wife that I had this job offer in Chicago that was quite lucrative, and I wanted to move up there. And the one thing she did is we toured in her car behind the band. At that point, the band was on a bus. So she went along with us behind the band and all this stuff. Because at that point, they weren't that fond of her just because they didn't know her, number one. And they were like, well, you know, this guy's going to be leaving the band.
It changes the dynamic.
Huh? Yeah.
You know.
And I think especially CJ, he was like my brother. We roomed together, and I'll never forget. I flew her up to Aspen because we were there for a week, and I flew her up to do some skiing and all this stuff. So I got her. I brought her to this little boutique hotel, and I got her in. I wanted to keep everything real low key, but when we got on the elevator, CJ was in the lobby on the couch, and he saw it, and he went, "Now that's going to be some real trouble right there." and then he even finally he said, "Well, Mel, can I ask you something?" I said, "Well," he said, "Why would you be flying a girl from Chicago up to Aspen with all these ski bunnies running around?" He said, "That's got to be something serious going on."
Yeah.
But you know, everybody
it
made their peace with it, and I told Sonny after it was all over. I said, probably the best thing that ever happened to you was for me to leave the band, because at that point, CJ left too, because his father had died, Clifton had died, and he took over his dad's band. That left Sonny with a trio. And he wasn't used to doing any of that. He didn't sing at that point. And the manager we had in New York got him an audition with John Hyatt. He was looking for a new band, and Sonny in that rhythm section got hired.
Wow.
And they stayed with Hyatt. And that supercharged his career. Not that it wouldn't have happened anyway, but that was an immediate opportunity for him. So, and like I said, man, we've stayed friends. I mean, he stayed at my parents' house, and I stayed at his mom's house. You know, when I'd go down there, she knew the sandwiches I liked, so she would make them up and put them in the refrigerator with my name on them and stuff. So it was really kind of like a big family down there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great that you guys are still in touch, you know.
Yeah, no kidding. There was a little bit of a learning curve there, but we all stuck together.
Well, 95 comes around, and Mel Melton and the Wicked Mojo. So you moved back to North Carolina around 1990. Based
91.
91. Okay. So Wikipedia's a little bit off.
Yeah, 90, something like that.
Something around there.
And once again, it was just this kind of opportunity. At that point, I had not played a lick of harmonica from the time I moved to Chicago.
Wow.
And I was going out and hearing all the hot shots, and they were like, "Man, why don't you come on out?" And I just felt like I had left that whole thing behind. And I was in a chef association called the Chaîne Rôtissiers. It's like this kind of glamorous group of food executives. And one of the guys who was directing it was the vice president of operations for a hotel chain. And he was like, "You're from North Carolina, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, we're moving back there. I'm getting ready to take over a hotel in Chapel Hill, and they've lost some of their mobile 5-star diamond status, and I need a right-hand man. Would you be interested in coming back to North Carolina and helping me with this project?" So once again, everything just fell in place. The money was great. I had a son. He was like between 1 and 2 years old. I knew I didn't want to raise a family in downtown Chicago because I had friends doing it, and it was like, man, I'm not gonna do that, you know. And my parents were struggling with their health. They lived in Hillsborough, so we made the decision to move back.
This made sense.
Then I did it, and then Sonny came through. He was playing at Cat's Cradle, and he asked me to come out and sit in with him. And there was a guy there that had a record label out of Chapel Hill, New Moon Music, Randy Friel. And he pulled me aside, and he was like, so he said, "So you live here now?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Man, would you be interested in," he said, "Do you have any other songs?" Because Congo Square was going to town.
Right.
And I said, "Yeah, I got a lot of them." And he said, "Well, why don't you come over to the studio?" I went over there, we talked, and he said, "Well, I'd like to do a record with you, but I need to know that you'll tour behind the record. And I said, no, I won't. I said, I'm not going back out on the road. I don't want to do that. And then there was a time frame that went by, and I started talking to my wife about it, and she was like, well, you know what? Now would be a good time to do that. If you want to do it, we're secure. We got a home in downtown Hillsboro. I got the son, and your family's right here, and you can go out and do that. So we did that, and then at that point, yeah, I've been back out there ever since, off and on.
And that record, well, actually, it was a Swamp Slinger that got top 10 blues CD in the Washington Post.
Yeah, it did.
Wow,
I know.
That's awesome.
We played a lot in Washington, D.C. that year.
That's great.
I'll tell you what, it came out when we were going into D.C. and playing at this club, and the owner of the club brought me, he said, have you seen this? And I was like, no, I have not. And yeah, that was real helpful. So
you guys kept playing for a while then. Walk me through how Papa Mojo's came about.
Oh boy,
in the 2000s.
And once again, that was an accident. Well, here's the thing: we were touring, and I'd had a friend. The guy went to Duke. He was from New York City, very wealthy family, and we hadn't seen each other in a long time. And the band was playing the New York State Blues Festival, and I got a call at the hotel, and it was him. And he said, is this the Mel Melton that played harmonica in Chapel Hill back in the day? I was like, I don't think there's anybody else. So he wanted to come out with his wife and see the band, which he did. And he was a filmmaker.
Okay.
At a pretty high level out of Hollywood and New York. And he was working on a Civil War documentary film. And part of the places he wanted to cover was around where I live in Caswell County, because there was a lot of stuff going on there back in that time.
Right.
And he was going to be down there for a couple of weeks. And I said, well, why don't you just come and stay at my house? I've got an extra bedroom. I got a cabin out back. So he did. And at that time, there was a group out of Richmond that wanted to open a Cajun restaurant. And they wanted to hire me to come up there and open this restaurant in Richmond. And I really didn't want to do it, but he was around all the time when they were calling. I was talking to him on the phone, and he said, well, what's this thing about Cajun restaurants? He said, I thought you were a musician. And I was like, no, I've been a chef for a long time. I've been doing this stuff off and on. And right away he said, well, let me tell you something. Don't talk to anybody. I'm your guy. He said, I got the money. I'll bankroll you. You want to open a Cajun restaurant, nightclub, whatever.
Wow.
I'm there for you. So he said, do you have anything specific? I said, yeah, this was a long time ago before any of this stuff broke. I said, I've had this idea for like a combination Cajun cooking music show that could be televised, to where you could bring musicians on to cook and bring cooks on to play music and just make it this deal. So he said, well, I'm going to put something together. We're going to fly out to Hollywood and we're going to pitch this thing. And we did.
Wow.
And we flew out there and it was pretty amazing. I mean, the people we met, but he refused to relinquish any control over any of the production. And these guys in Hollywood were like,
they want.
Well, one guy pulled me aside. And he said, can I ask you something? I said, yeah. He said, what's your tie-in with this guy? And I said, well, he's an old friend of mine. And I said, and he's the money guy. He's bankrupt.
The money guy.
Yeah. He said, well, let me tell you something. We don't need his money.
Right.
We got money out here.
Right.
And I said, well, here's the difference is I've been knowing the guy since 1968. I've been knowing you for like 4 days. So I'm going to stick with him. So and the guy told me, so I'm going to tell you something. You pitched a hot idea out here, and it's a winner. And he said, if you go back to North Carolina and you don't do it, somebody's going to do it. Somebody's going to do it.
Yeah.
And it has been kind of.
Well, we've seen it over the last.
You've seen the way it's
15,
happened. There's
20
some
years.
shows that have happened like that. So So then, we went ahead and cut a new CD in New Orleans, and he was part of that. He was like one of the producers on that. And then it got down to this Papa Mojo's Roadhouse thing, because I had named the record Papa Mojo's Roadhouse with a logo of this swamp nightclub out in the middle of nowhere. And he said, well, why don't we really open one? Let's really do one. He said, I've got real estate all the way down the East Coast. He said, you get one of these going and we could open like several down the East Coast, and, you could book bands in all of them and feed them on down to Florida. And that was the mission with that project. It was never to have one gumbo shack in Durham. It was always proposed that we would advance it and make it something that could be duplicated. But a lot of bad things happened. I mean, he had some major health stuff that he almost bailed out.
Okay.
And, his family and his physicians had said, he's got to get away from any of this action, stressing him out and everything. So we had not opened another one since then. We looked at some offers that didn't come together, and then the lease was coming up, and he had already left, and I could not run what he was running and what I was running.
Right.
And, the lease came up, and I was like, that's about enough of this stuff. I've been there almost 8 years, and I lived like, it was a 90-mile round trip for me every day to go to the restaurant and back. So,
yeah.
So, the game plan was, I talked to my wife and my family, and they were like, take off a couple months. And before you get into anything, because I had a lot of offers in downtown Durham right off the bat, before it blew up the way it is now. And I'll be honest with you, after I'd been off a couple of months, I realized I just didn't have that energy or that drive to do another project like that, because it just takes so much time and energy to do that. It in any business, especially that one.
Oh yeah.
So since then I've been doing this, doing that. Like I said, we're doing a new record. The band's played. We've been to Europe once. I went over there last year by myself and my wife and hooked up with some musicians over there, and we got something going on with that. And then I just inadvertently picked up these restaurant consulting projects where people came to me and said, look, I need somebody that can do this, that. And it seems like one's led to the other. I haven't hung a shingle up saying Mel Melton Restaurant
Just
Consulting.
word of mouth.
Yeah, and if you do one right, then you got another one waiting. So that's what I've been doing. And normally when I meet with them, the first thing I try to do is talk them out of it. It's like, why in the world do you want to do? Normally, it's interesting. Is most of the people that get in it have been very successful in some business, real estate or wholesale marketing or whatever, and then they decide they want to do the restaurant. Well, the restaurant business is like no other business, and unless you really know the steps, it ain't that much fun. So. But at the end of the day, if they decide they want to write me a check, I'm like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. Well, real quick, I've got Bobby Flay down here in 2008.
You got what?
Bobby Flay presented you with the Casual Dining first place award with that. I guess that was with Papa Mojo's, right?
Yeah. We were named the...
I never even knew that. And I was there during that time.
The North Carolina Agricultural Commission, the marketing, had this contest, and it was best in the state. And you could either go in the casual category or the fine dining category, and you would submit like a complete menu, with a dessert. Well, you had to pick your main category,
right?
Appetizer, whatever,
right? So
I came up with something, and I got a call saying you won it. You won the grand prize.
Wow.
So I was like, well, there you go. That's good. And then it was going to be announced at, I can't remember, some ballroom or something. Well, Bobby Flay was the presenter.
Okay.
So everybody came out there, and and Bobby. And the thing about Bobby, I didn't know Bobby. I watched him on TV, and my presumption was he seems a little bit hard-edged, you know. He seems a little bit New York over the top.
Kind of like an act, almost, you know.
But the reality is, he's one of the sweetest guys I ever met.
Yeah.
You know, I guess he just doesn't want people to know that. And then he came out, you know, while he was in town. And, you know, that was a beautiful thing. And then not too long after that, Anthony Bourdain was coming in to do a show at DPAC. Mm-hmm. And he called a friend of mine who owned a really good French restaurant downtown. And he said, look, I want to have a party after the show at DPAC, but I want food people and music people. I don't want press there. I just want to get in there and have fun. So I was one of the guys that I got called to go down there, and I got to hang around with Anthony Bourdain. Yeah, he was a nice guy.
Yeah.
Funny guy, too. Very sharp individual. So God bless him.
Well, we've got a couple other things here real quick. I want to ask you this. It's safe to say, whether you want to admit it or not, you're obviously an entrepreneur. Now, whether you wanted to be or not, I don't know. Because it sounds like there were opportunities that percolated and you just grabbed them.
Yeah, they just came up, you know, like that Rolls-Royce Krug champagne thing. We were one of 18 chefs to even get an invitation for this thing.
Wow.
And it was at the McCormick family steeplechase farm, and it was hoity-toity. And I ended up winning the grand prize. Nobody could believe it. I couldn't. But at that point, my sous chef and I were in the back drinking champagne. We were getting messed up. And my wife was like, Mel, they're calling your name. Get up there. So, yeah, it just seems like it's been just like in the right place at the right time sometimes, not always.
Sometimes, yeah.
But for now, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I told you, I turned 70 in August, and I know I'm in the twilight of whatever I want to do. I just want to make everything make sense and be valuable as far as I can, you know.
What would you suggest to the younger listeners and viewers as far as entrepreneurship and following your gut, perhaps? Any advice for them?
Well, I would think follow your gut. You know, follow your soul, follow your calling, and don't get discouraged. You know, because you're going to stumble. So, but just if you believe in it, just keep doing it and don't give up on it, whatever it is.
Right.
You know, do the best you can at it and get up every day and do the best you can every day. And respect everybody and you know, be a good person.
Yeah.
You know.
A lot of power in that, for sure. We've got a little thing here that I like to do at the end. It's called the shootout, which is basically I just say a word and you kind of popcorn off the first thing that comes to mind. It could be another word or a sentence or just like a very short answer back.
Okay.
Harmonica.
Real.
Excellent. Washboard.
Rub board.
Okay. Cajun.
Acadien.
Ah! That's legit. Louisiana.
Amazing.
North Carolina.
My home.
Yeah. Same here. Fried.
Fried? Everything's good.
I gotta say, I got turned on to fried pickles. Did you do fried pickles at Papa
I think we
Mojo's?
may have done them as a special one time because I had just discovered them, but
Yeah.
I never had them on the menu.
Pretty damn good.
Dadgum right they are.
God. The ranch dressing, you know?
Yeah.
Studio.
Work.
Live.
Fun.
Ah, okay. Vocal performance.
You never know.
Ooh. I gotta probe a little bit with that one. Just a little bit more. What elaborate just a touch on that.
Well, I mean, it really depends on a lot of things. The thing I've noticed is the more I play, the stronger my voice gets. And when I start downsizing and not playing that many gigs and then going back in and starting playing live, it's like you lose that muscle, you lose that tone. It's almost like going in the gym.
Yes.
The more you work out, the stronger you get. As soon as you quit, so I have to work my way back up to that level with the vocal thing.
Gotcha. And can relate. Touring.
Say what?
Touring.
Been there, done that.
Band.
Wow. I've got a good one.
Oh, for damn sure.
Yeah.
Restaurant business.
It's not for everybody.
Yeah. Music business.
It's not for everybody.
Yeah. Our last one. Blues.
It's infinite.
There you have it. Last question, which is similar to what I just asked you earlier, but it's even a little bit more specific. If you could go back in time to your 15-year-old self, knowing what you know now and the experiences that you've had, what would you tell him?
I'd say go to college and go to law school. No, I would say the same thing. Just, I really think stay true to your calling. The one thing about my father, like I said, he was an operatic tenor and classically trained, and when I started playing harmonica as a career as a musician, he and my mom flew down to Louisiana to check everything out, and then when he heard the band and he heard me play, he said, "I would never tell you not to do that."
Yeah.
So he said, "That's what you want to do it.
Yeah.
Just do it right." So
Yeah.
because I really wasn't that good on the violin anyway.
How long did you play violin for?
I started when I was 9, and I played up until high school.
Okay.
When I was 9, we were in Charlotte, and I was in a youth symphony.
Right.
And I loved that. When we moved to Gastonia, I had individual lessons, and I never really liked that. And the other thing, just as an aside, is, my family has a hereditary neuromuscular disease. It's a form of muscular dystrophy, and all the males in the family have gotten it. And it's progressive, and it affects the extremities. Your hands, your feet, your toes and everything. And I have had to have some major surgery relating to that from the time I was 13 up until a couple years ago. And the neurologist that I had said, "You know what? You're lucky that you picked the harmonica." He said, "Because there's no way you'd ever be able to play piano or violin or any stringed instrument at that level."
Wow.
Because you just don't have the muscle and the nerves anymore.
Wow.
So I got lucky with that one. At least I can still hold one. That's
Wow. Well, your story is very inspiring. And again, thanks so much for making the drive out.
Thank you. It was good to see you.
It's good to have you here. And we'll put in the description box on YouTube all the information and the links and you can feel free to send me anything that we didn't cover on the phone call or here today.
Same here.
And we'll just kind of head our way out. Thank you guys for watching as always. And again, description box below. Look out for this guy because he's still kicking. He's still beating ass with his music. And band is incredible.
They really are.
Always enjoy seeing you guys live.
You.
And
same to you.
Well, thank you. And thank you again for giving me an outlet and a platform in my teen years because we played Papa's many times, and between open mics and actual shows, and that was the early development stages for me as a frontman.
Well, let me tell you, the first time you did it and I was there and I heard you, we were just like, who is this guy? Because we got a lot of youngsters coming in there wanting to, and that was part of the thing. But there were several that had a talent level, but none of them approached yours. So
wow,
to have you in there at that age,
coming from you, that means a lot.
well, it's true.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
I guess we'll end on that note. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.